If you are from the greater Port Washington area, we would love to have you as a volunteer. And if you're interested, please check out our volunteer page on our website at wglbbo.org. Join us, volunteer. You can get there from the main menu. And last but not least, I would like to thank everybody who makes this possible, both from our partners, but also sponsors. So I'll get to turn it over to Chuck Hagner, who is the chair of the board of the Western Great Lakes Bird and Bat Observatory and the director of Bird Cities, in addition to being an author and an amazing birder. So give it up for Chuck, and it'll take me 1 second to switch over.
Well, thanks, Jen. And I'll be ready to start as soon as we do the switches here. There we go. Thanks for everyone for being here. I'm Chuck Hagner, and I am especially delighted to be able to talk about 7 simple actions to help birds right around World Migratory Bird Day, which was celebrated for by a lot of communities throughout Wisconsin and around the world recently. By way of introduction, I want to let everybody know that the occasion for these 7 simple actions occurred way back in 2019 when the journal Science published a pretty shocking study that revealed that in less than a single lifetime, about 50 years, a half a century, North America lost more than 1 in 4 of its breeding birds. The article was the result of the work of 7 institutions, including the Cornell Lab and the American Bird Conservancy, and 5 other things. And it represented the first ever comprehensive assessment of net population change in breeding bird populations in North America. That's the United States and Canada. And it showed that populations had declined by 29%, or by almost 3 billion birds since 1970. The declines were shocking to say the least, because birds, as I'm sure everybody here knows, function as an indicator of overall environmental health. So to realize that so many breeding birds were no longer with us was a shocking signal that all of our natural systems that we had relied on for keeping wildlife populations robust in the past were no longer functioning as they were in the past. Fortunately, birds have proven over and over again that they're very resilient. They will come back if we help them, and there are many ways that we can do this. Some of them are a little bit beyond what you and I can do in our own yards. They require policy decisions such as strengthening the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, but others are simple everyday actions that we all can make. And in this talk, I'll describe 7. You can see them in graphic form on the left side of my screen here. From the top, you can see the first one is making windows safer. Second is keeping cats indoors. The third is using native plants. The fourth is avoiding pesticides. The fifth is drinking shade-grown coffee. 6 is reduce plastic waste. And the final one is doing citizen or community science. And before I start, I want to let everybody know that each one of these could easily be a talk all to itself. This is a rich subject area, and what I can give you in this time period is just going to be a summary of those. I'm going to mention a number of products that you can buy and use around your home. I'll mention a bunch of studies that are the foundation for the conclusions that I'm going to be talking about, and a number of articles that you can find on the web. We will be emailing you a document afterwards that contains a link to each one of these products, studies, and articles. And before I get really going, I wanted to just say hello to anyone who might be watching from outside Wisconsin. You may see a slight Wisconsin focus in my talk, but I want you to know that this is a talk that I could give in any state and feel confident about. All of the actions that I talk about in here will apply to the birds in your state just as much as they apply to the birds here in the land of the cheesehead. So let's get started. First thing that any one of us can do is make your windows safer day and night. The challenge here is that each year up to 1 billion birds die after hitting windows in the United States. We know this because of a very important study that was published back in 2014, published and created by researchers at the Migratory Bird Center at the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And they conducted a very systematic review of fatality records, 92,000 fatality records, records of birds striking windows and being killed in those. And they came up with a number, conservative number of 365 million to 988 million birds killed each year in the United States. But they did also something that's really, really very, very interesting in addition to just counting up mortality. They classified the buildings that were involved in all of those fatality records into 3 building classes. They categorized them all as either high rises, which are buildings 12 stories and taller, low rises, which they said would be between 4 and 11 stories tall, and then the final category, houses and residences, which were the low rises 1 to 3 stories tall. And I know that it's common wisdom that the high rises would kill the most birds because they're the biggest and they're covered with the most extensive surfaces of glass. And in fact, their studies did show that the rate of mortality at the high rises was the highest of the 3 classes. But the surprise was that the high rises, those buildings that were covered with all that glass, accounted for the smallest percentage of overall mortality. That's that big number, that 1 billion birds killed each year. And so it's counterintuitive that these buildings, these tall buildings, would have the highest rate of mortality, but yet they would make a contribution, an overall contribution that is the smallest. And the reason, of course, is that there are way more residences in the United States than there are high rises. In fact, as you can see here, residences make up 87.5% of all the buildings in the United States. And you and I probably live in one of those residences, one of those 1 to 3 story tall buildings. And I mention this because what this means is that each one of us, you and I, have a huge opportunity to make a difference to the number of birds that die each year by striking windows. The problem, of course, is that by day birds look at windows and they don't understand what we understand when we look at a window. By day, they see reflections in the glass, and they think that they can fly to those reflections as habitat. They see trees reflected in a window, they fly toward it. Or if your home is the type that maybe one window is aligned with another, a bird will see a passageway that they can fly through. And then the problem is made worse also at night because all kinds of migratory birds, especially during the migration season, are drawn in by city light. These are pretty simple things to take care of, and they're simple actions to remedy this situation, and then they can be summed up in 3 simple ways. You can install a barrier, or you can try to make the glass visible or break up that illusion of a passageway. And you can shield your exterior lights or turn them off. So how do you go about and do that? There's a bunch of really excellent products that you can buy nowadays that in effect create a barrier between the glass and the bird. One of them may be on your home right now, and that's a simple old insect screen. If you live in a home that has no screens on the windows, you can actually cushion the impact that a bird would feel if it flew into your windows by just adding screens. Another way to do it is by using a product that's called Easy Up Shades. This is a product that I think was designed, I think it's made in Florida, and it's designed to be affixed to the exterior of the window. And then what it does is it's a solar screen panel that prevents the heat gain inside the window from steady and persistent hot sun. But the really great thing about them is that they are attached to the window pane on the exterior of the window with suction cups, so that panel of a solar screen stands a slight distance away from the pane of glass. So if a bird were to make contact with that glass, it would have like a little cushion, a barrier between itself and the glass. And the other great thing about these is that they come in a number of colors that make your windows less reflective and easier for a bird to be able to recognize as a threat. Another barrier that you could choose to install is called the bird crash preventer. This is a curtain of monofilament lines, fishing lines, that are strung vertically across the exterior of your window, about 3 inches apart. The idea there is that a bird will see those and recognize a pane of glass before it flies into it. And if it does actually make contact with those lines, it'll recognize something and then fly back before it makes contact. And finally, there's a product called Bird Screen. Bird Screen are black fiberglass screens that are attached to screw hooks up in the top of the frame, or maybe with suction cups to the window pane, and it's a black mesh screen that hangs in front of the exterior of your window, and allows creates kind of a trampoline effect, actually, by giving a surface that's in front of the glass and keeps the bird from being injured if it were to fly into it. Each one of these screens is constructed in such a way that a person inside the building, looking out the window, would still be able to see out. There's tiny little dots in them, little holes in them that allow you to see them. And again, if you're struggling with trying to write down these names, I want you to know that the names of all of these products will be included in that document that we'll send to you later, along with links. So you can just click on it and be taken right to the manufacturer's website. The other option, as you can see here, is to make glass visible. Making glass visible can be as simple as getting yourself some tempera paints, and then maybe giving yourself an art assignment by whipping up some designs and painting the exterior of your window. The goal there is to create a pattern on the exterior of your glass that breaks up any reflected habitat that they would see, and breaks up that illusion of a passageway through your window. It can be as simple as that. You can also use decals, mylar strips that you hang in front of the window, feathers on monofilament line, strung beads or bamboo sections. I've even seen people dangling old CD-ROM discs in front of their windows. Anything that gives a bird an indication that that bush or that tree that they're seeing reflected in that window is actually something to be avoided. That's what all of those things will do. Of course, there are some products that you can buy that work excellently. One of them is called the Acopian bird savers. Acopian, it's a funny word. It's from the Acopian Center out east. A-C-O-P-I-A-N, Acopian bird savers. These are lengths of parachute cord that dangle from the top of the exterior of your window, not attached at the bottom, so they hang free. and they just dangle gently in the wind outside the exterior of your window. And they are extraordinarily effective at letting birds know that that big pane of glass that they otherwise might have flown toward is in fact, there's something there that I should really stay away from. Other ways that you can make your windows visible is by using some of these stick-on products like Kaleidoscape is a window film that comes in a number of colors, and it actually adheres to the exterior of the window. You can use feather-friendly do-it-yourself tape, another excellent product that you can use to make a series of, to leave a little bit of an array of dots on the exterior of your window. If you're inside looking through the window, you would probably not notice hardly anything at all, but to a bird on the outside, those dots would make that glass visible and make that reflection make obvious that that pane of glass was there. There's another highly recommended product called Solix, bird safety window film and tapes. These come in a number of different ways, whether either you can cover your glass completely like the Kaleidoscape, or you can use a tape to create a grid of dots on the exterior of your window. Both work perfectly to make your windows apparent to the birds and to break up that reflection. I want to stop here and just mention one thing that I'm not including in this list. And in past years, I think that you might have heard a lot about decals that you would stick to the exterior of your window, and they might come in the form of leaves or bird shapes or other natural shapes. And their selling point was that they reflected an ultraviolet light. And there's value in those, but it comes with a pretty significant caveat, and that is that while some birds can see ultraviolet light, the scientific evidence is starting to indicate that birds of prey, geese, pigeons, and crows, and maybe some other birds have a hard time picking up those same wavelengths. So what may work for a small passerine, a small songbird, a gull, or a parrot, birds that can see ultraviolet light very well may not work very well for these other species. So it's not certain how effective those UV type decals are. So I'm not including them in my list of recommended products. And then the other thing that everyone should keep in mind is that the 2x4 rule has been revised downward and made a little bit tighter. The 2x4 rule was always the way that you would have to think about how far apart each one of the items that you put on your window should be. In the past, the idea was that you should not leave a space on your window that is not covered by paint or by tempera paint or by any of these stickers or tape that is any more than 2 inches from top to bottom and 4 inches from left to right. It's about the size of a deck of cards if you were to put it down and view it kind of in a horizontal orientation. But it turns out that there are a number of birds that can fit through a 2-inch space. Hummingbirds have no trouble flying through a 4-inch space. So the thinking now is that if you were to make leave no space on your window unstickered or unpainted that's any larger than 2 inches by 2 inches, you would prevent even the smallest of birds from thinking that they could see a spot in your window and fly through it. So that spacing is very critical also. The final step here, of course, is to shield exterior lights or turn them off. There's a number of ways to do that. You can just turn off decorative exterior lighting. You can turn off spotlights and floodlights. And if you have the type of lights that are directed upward or horizontally, you can get some sort of shields that would downshield those exterior lights so that, especially in bad weather during the migratory seasons, a bird wouldn't be confused by the lights of your home and then be drawn toward it. And of course, in bad weather and at nighttime, birds are at risk of perhaps colliding with windows or towers or other things. So the less light that we have, the better. One of the other ways that you can remove the amount of light that is around your house is to use light motion sensors and light timers. This works very well also. The other thing I wanted to mention before I move on is that in August, I believe I will be giving another talk just on window collisions, bird window collisions, and how to avoid them. I'll show all these products, and I'll try to present this in more detail. So if you want to just put that on your back burner, we can meet again and we can talk about birds again later. Everybody likes cats. They are a great pet, and this one certainly is beautiful. But the second simple action that we can all do to help birds is to keep the cats indoors where they belong. The challenge, of course, is that cats kill more than 2.6 billion birds every year in the United States and Canada. We know this because of a study published in 2012 by researchers from the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Center, the Division of Migratory Birds. What they found is that free-ranging cats in the United States kill between 1.3 and 4 billion birds, and 6.3, and between 6.3 and 22.3 billion mammals every year. They're just staggering numbers. And they also realized that it was unowned cats, as opposed to owned cats. So it's not maybe the cat that's curled up on your lap right now that is causing the most majority. It's unowned cats that are causing the majority, about as much as 2/3. But cats, no matter how you slice it, are the #1 human-caused source of death among birds and mammals, aside from habitat loss. To put that into a graphic presentation, you can see on this graph, along the x-axis down along the bottom, there's a number of sources of human-caused or anthropogenic mortality, starting with wind turbines at the far right, agricultural chemicals, and then power line electrocutions and communication towers, all the way through collisions with automobiles and building windows. And you can see that by the time you start getting to collisions with building windows, you've got a pretty big number. That's where that these are means, so almost 600 million there for collisions with building windows. But that dark number, that dark bar on the left is 2.4 billion. It's almost like you need a new scale for the order of magnitude of the mortality that is attributed to cats. 2.4 billion cats, 2.4 billion birds every year by cats in the United States. And then you can see by the blue bar down there that there's another 200 million or so that is attributed to cats in Canada. So the two of them then together is like where that 2.6 billion number comes from. The issue here is that there are more than 110 feral and pet cats roaming the United States and Canada. And that cats, of course, are non-native. They were brought here originally. And the other thing to keep in mind about cats is that they hunt instinctively. This is in their makeup to do what they're doing, and that means that they'll kill birds even when they themselves are well fed. But there's a number of things that we can do, simple actions, and the simplest, of course, is to keep cats indoors. If that's an issue, there are many products out there that make being kept indoors, if you're a cat, quite marvelous, actually. If you have the time and the inclination, I encourage you at some point to Google the term one fast cat. And what you will see is one of the coolest exercise wheels you've ever seen for a cat. And it'll only set you back $249, but it's quite lovely. If you're interested even more, I encourage you to go to a website called House Panther. It's spelled the way the Germans spell house, though. It's H-A-U-S and then Panther all together. And what you will see there is a remarkable collection of indoor climbing systems and steps and scratchers and perches and houses and towers for the cats. You know, Julie and I here, we owned 2 cats for quite a long time. And when I saw the wealth of really cool things for cats at this site, I felt like maybe I had let my two cats down. They were indoor cats, and we didn't have anywhere near the enriched indoor environment that we could have had. If you do own a cat and you really want to let your cat outside, there are many ways that you can do that safely. One is to convert the fence around your backyard into a cat-safe fence. There are ways nowadays to make the top of your fence into something that a cat can't easily grab onto. It'll spin back, or it's got like a fence type cover at the top that keeps the cats in the yard where they started out. And of course, the other idea too is that nowadays it's really quite easy to make what's called a catio. This is a enclosed, portable or permanent enclosure, a fenced enclosure with perches and places to sit, where the cat can be outdoors, but still enclosed in something so that the cat doesn't go roaming. There's a very nice woman in my neighborhood who uses a backpack to carry her little puppy. And I know from going to a number of websites this week in preparation for this talk that there are strollers, there are harnesses, there's even instructional videos on training your cat to become accustomed to walking with a harness and a leash. But if that's, you know, if your cat does roam free, there are some options also there too. Another opportunity to Google would be to look at Birds Be Safe. If you were to Google that, you would see some very brightly colored fabric collars that would be put around the neck of your cat. The idea being that this big bright collar around the outside of your cat's neck would make it much more visible to any bird that it tried to hunt. And there's also a product called the Cat Bib. Cat Bib. It's a long, flexible bib that kind of like hangs around the cat's neck and extends for a distance to maybe about midpoint around its legs. And what it does is the manufacturer says that it interrupts the cat's motions as or its timings and its coordination as it's making a pouncing motion. So even though it would be roaming outside, it would be a dramatically less effective predator. And finally, the one simple action that I think everyone should consider is speaking out about the impacts of feral cat colonies. You know, again, about 2/3 of the overall annual bird mortality comes from unowned cats, and the unowned cats' lives may be as short as 2 years because of the disease and hardship of living outside all the time. And there's just no real good reason for them to be unowned and out there. So the third simple action is to reduce lawn and to plant native plants. The challenge here is that birds are losing safe places to rest and refuel during migration, and they're losing safe places to raise their young. And the reason for that is because of habitat loss. Over the past century, it's estimated that 150 million acres of habitat and farmland has been lost to urban sprawl in the continental United States, 150 million acres. And it's also estimated that manicured turf lawns cover about 50 million acres of land in the United States. This fact is like a main focus of the Neighborhood Habitat Improvement Project. So one of the simple actions that I would recommend to anyone is to join the Neighborhood Habitat Improvement Project, and certainly to pay attention to the great offerings on the NHIP website, because there you'll find all kinds of resources about what plants to choose and how to go about converting to creating what I like to call as, what I like to think of as fire escapes. That's a reference to a very excellent paper that David Melman and David Ewert and a number of other wildlife biologists published in the AUK, the Journal of the American Ornithological Union, back in 2005. It was about conserving stopover sites for forest-dwelling migratory birds. And what they did that I thought was so genius was that they broke all of these different types of habitats, stopover sites, into three categories. They said they exist on a continuum, of course, but at one end would be like what they call the full-service hotels. This would be the extensive forested habitat, the big, the Kettle Moraine National Forest type, contiguous, safe, green, magnificent places for birds to spend a bunch of time. Then stepping down from that would be the parks, woodlots, small blocks of wooded areas where birds can stop over briefly and replenish, but not anywhere near as big as the big contiguous forests. They call this mid range habitat. They call these stopovers convenience stores. And at the farthest, smallest end of the spectrum, they had what they called fire escapes. Fire escapes is a perfect name because a fire escape, if you think about it, it's something that you rarely ever have an opportunity to use, but when you need it, it may save your life, and you're happy that it's there. This would be something very small, a little parcel of land, and oftentimes they said that the fire escape might be located adjacent to a bigger barrier to migration and to breeding. So their importance to a bird becomes even more valuable, more important because of the fact that the bird had to travel through a hostile environment in order to find it. The value of these fire escapes grows when there's lots of small little patches, and it becomes even greater when maybe they are located close to what might be considered a convenience store. And this, if you think about it, could be a way to think about any one of the backyards that becomes a part of the Neighborhood Habitat Improvement Project. A little parcel of native habitat of great value to a bird needing a spot to rest, to refuel, to find insects, to feed itself, and then to move on to its to that full-service hotel where it will spend the night, or where it will lay its eggs and live later. Join the Neighborhood Habitat Improvement Project. It's exactly what you would want for this sort of thing. This is the flip side here of it, as you might imagine, the fourth simple action that you can do to help birds is to avoid pesticides. The challenge here is that, well, there's a number of challenges here. Number one is that it's very difficult to find numbers of mortality that can be linked directly to pesticides for the United States. These numbers, 672 million birds are exposed to pesticides on agricultural lands in the United States annually, and 67 million are killed are true and they're valuable, and they hint at the scope of the problem here. But they're probably only just a fraction of the exposure to pesticides that birds in the United States face. And they probably are only a fraction of the mortality. And the reason that that is so is because they come from a study that considered only birds on farmlands and only birds that were killed outright by ingestion of pesticides. So unless a bird ate some ingested a pesticide and then dropped dead and could be counted by someone with a clipboard, it didn't get counted. Similar studies in Canada show that agricultural chemicals kill 2.7 million birds annually there. It's a remarkable total, and it's scary to think that it's just only a fraction of the real number. I'll stop for a second and say that pesticides is a catch-all term. I think that at one point I thought that pesticides applied only to, the word pesticide meant only insecticides. But in fact, a pesticide is a catch-all term. It means insecticides, rodenticides, fungicides, herbicides, and really any other substance designed to kill target organisms. So pesticides is a big topic. And pesticides that are toxic to birds can harm them directly through contact, or if they eat contaminated seeds or prey. This is a big issue for hawks and some other birds of prey when a rodenticide is used to kill a rodent, a rat in New York City or any other big city, and then the rat goes belly up on the sidewalk, and a hawk thinks that he's found an easy meal. Seizes it and eats it, and then the bird ingests the rodenticide, and that pesticide then kills twice. One, the target species, and the other one, the unintended. The pesticides, I should say, also can harm birds indirectly by reducing the annual amount of prey that birds need to survive. This is a big issue with the use of insecticides, which reduces the number of insects that especially classes of birds that rely on them, like all of our flycatchers and other aerial insectivores, need in order to survive. We know that about 1.2 billion pounds of pesticides are applied in the United States each year. And 5.7 billion pounds of pesticides are used worldwide. And that there are 20,000 different pesticide products registered in the United States. The pesticides that are of concern for birds are chemical insecticides and fungicides, commonly used in agriculture and farming practices, herbicides used to control invasive plant species, and the rodenticides that are used to control mostly rats, but also mice and prairie dogs. And the continent's most widely used insecticides are neonicotinoids, or neonics. They're lethal to birds and insects, and the insects that birds consume, and they have become kind of a subject of deep concern all to themselves because of they're able to cause all of these unexpected non-target effects. They remain in the environment for years after application. They contaminate soil and nearby water bodies. And what we've discovered is that they can move from a treated plant to a pollinator, such as a bee, and wipe out the bee population, or from plants to pests to the natural enemies of those pests, such as birds or fish. There are many indirect targets, indirect victims of the application of neonics. Simple actions, there's a bunch of those. The first is pretty simple, and that is to purchase organic food. And I say that because nearly 70% of food, produce, I should say, produce sold in the United States contains pesticides. A large amount of the coffee that you drink was also grown in non-organic areas and with pesticides also. But simply by buying organic produce, you would be reducing the demand for that food and therefore making it possible that perhaps less of the crops would be sprayed with the pesticides. The University of California Agricultural and Natural Resources Department recommends also asking a number of questions aimed at helping you decide whether using a pesticide is really necessary. And one of those questions is the pest really the cause of your problem? The reason they want you to stop and ask that question is because too often pesticides are applied applied inconsistently or unnecessarily because the cause of the damage has been misidentified. How many pests are you seeing? Are there just a few? In which case maybe using a pesticide is not necessary, or a lot, in which case maybe it might be. And one of the questions that I thought was best was asking whether you can change the conditions that caused a pest to become a problem. Prevention, of course, is always the best strategy, but sometimes just a change in weather will change the situation. And sometimes it's a gardening practice that causes a problem. Powdery mildew, for example, is favored by shade. It prefers shade. So if whatever the plant is that might be showing that mildew were exposed to light, a gardening practice, maybe by opening the canopy above it or by moving the plant, you would be able to deal with the mildew without any kind of a pesticide applications. The other things is that maybe there are cultural controls, using the right pruning or fertilizing or watering regime, or selecting pest-resistant varieties or species to plant would make it possible to avoid using a pesticide. You might be able to use mulches to keep weeds from growing, or solarization to keep pathogens from growing. Solarization is when you take some plastic tarps or plastic sheets and you cover a patch of plant life, and especially in the hot part of the year, and then the temperature beneath that plastic tarp increases to a point where it kills off the pests or the weeds and things underneath it. Hoeing, spraying leaves forcefully with water, or using traps, creating barriers can exclude pests. All of those mechanical controls can also make it possible for you to achieve the good results in your garden that you don't without using a pesticide. And I guess the other option is that you can always replant. Sometimes replanting in a different spot or replanting a different variety is really the way to go, rather than just soaking the plant that you've used with some new pesticide. If you do choose a pesticide, a simple action is simply to use the correct pesticide. And that means identifying the organism correctly, so that and then matching the pesticide to the organism, and then using the least toxic pesticide possible. Of course, you should avoid using neonics. The Center for Food Safety, in the document, you'll be able to see there's a document that they published that lists a lot of the common pesticides on the market that contain neonics, and they recommend that you avoid those if you must. And then finally, all pesticides should be applied with considerable care. This means that you watch the weather, don't spray or apply pesticides before you're expecting a rain that would wash all the pesticides down into a different area. Don't apply in the wind, avoid runoff, and read all the instructions about the pesticide. All of these things can help avoid the bird mortality associated with pesticides. The fifth simple action that I hope everybody does is to drink a coffee that is good for birds. The challenge here is that North America's migratory songbirds are losing rainforest habitat that they rely on during the non-breeding season. The cause of that is that the majority of all the coffee that is served and is available for sale is grown in the sun. And that sounds natural enough, but sun coffee is a certain type of coffee. And to produce it, farmers in Central and South America clear the rainforests that birds and other wildlife need for the food and shelter. They cut down, they remove the canopy, the trees, and they plant their coffee plants, the coffee trees, the same way that you might see corn in agricultural areas here in the United States. What to do is pretty simple. This is one of the simplest actions that's on our list, and it's probably the tastiest, and that is to drink bird-friendly coffee. That is it's capitalized for a reason, the capital B and the capital F, because it is coffee that bears the seal that you see right here, this bird-friendly icon. It means that the coffee that you've purchased and that you're about to drink was grown in conditions that are certified to meet the high standards of the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center. This means that the coffee was not grown in the sun, but it was grown under shade. It was grown under shade trees. And that's important because shade trees sequester carbon. They fight climate change, and most important, they provide habitat for all sorts of migratory birds and native birds, birds that are resident in the rainforest. Bird-friendly certified coffee is also organic, meaning that they are grown without pesticides. Producers earn more for their crops, and the great thing about it is that as many as 73 North American songbirds have been documented wintering in shade coffee plantations. That includes orioles, warblers, thrushes. 17 of them 17 of these birds are common. The list includes 56 that have been found and 9 that are likely. But it's one of the simplest ways that you can preserve habitat for a bird on the non-breeding grounds is to drink bird-friendly coffee. I know that it can be a challenge to find at times, but I think that one of the greatest things that a birder or someone who drinks coffee could do is to ask for bird-friendly coffee. Sometimes I think that our role should be one of an ambassador. We can, and an ambassador will educate coffee shops and grocery stores. And also, I think that this is one of the things that you can do too, is it's a way you can be an ambassador to your friends. And you can say, this is important to me and it's important to birds to drink bird-friendly coffee. Here are 2 products that are especially noteworthy because they're so easy to obtain. The yellow package on the left is available on the shelf now at Target. It is brewed by Steep and Brew in Madison, and it is certified bird-friendly. And the Allegro coffee is the coffee of Whole Foods markets. So this blend, the organic early bird blend, you can see is certified as bird-friendly. There are a number of other Cafe Fair blends or varieties that are also certified as bird-friendly. That would be like the Cafe Fair El Salvador, the Cafe Fair Morning Blend, which is the one that's pictured here, Cafe Fair Guatemalan, and also there's a Cafe Fair Espresso. You can just go right to Target, or you can go right to Whole Foods, and you can purchase a bag of coffee. In fact, that Allegro coffee right there is I photographed that just the other day using my iPhone. That's my own coffee right there. If you don't live near a Target, or you don't have access to a Whole Foods, or if you're just in the habit of shopping via your computer, as we all are now, you can go to the National Zoo, the website of the National Zoo, the Smithsonian's National Zoo, at this URL, or you can just Google bird-friendly coffee, and you'll be taken to this website. And what it will do is it will allow you to search by retailers, and also by by producers, and you can place your orders directly right through the website. It's as simple as could be to find shade-grown coffee. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention also that Bird City, Wisconsin, for a long time has been offering Birds and Beans coffee, which is also certified as bird-friendly, and you can order that coffee right from the Bird City, Wisconsin website. And a portion of that, each sale of those of that coffee, will go to support Bird City, Wisconsin, which is a great program, if I do say so myself. Number 6, the amount of plastic that is being discarded in this world is simply mind-boggling. So the 6th simple action that we should all commit to making is to protect our planet from plastic. The challenge here is that thousands of seabirds and sea turtles, seals, and other animals are killed each year after ingesting plastic or getting entangled in it. This is especially bad for seabirds because plastic trash has been found in 90% of seabirds. And that number is predicted to increase to as high as 99% by the year 2050. And this is very, very bad because, of course, plastic in a seabird's stomach reduces the storage volume of the stomach, and the birds slowly starve. And dead seabirds have been found often with cigarette lighters, toothbrushes, and all sorts of other plastic trash in their stomachs. The cause, of course, is that we are hooked on single-use plastic, and we are bad, very, very bad at recycling. Global plastic production increases or doubles every year. In the first decade of this century, we made more plastic than all the plastic made in history up to the year 2000. And the bad thing is that plastic generally takes about 400 years to degrade. Even though there is all this plastic being created, at least 91%, maybe more, is not recycled. I came across, while I was preparing this, I came across this startling statistic, and that is that there are 15 to 51 trillion pieces of plastic in the world's oceans. Not 1 square mile of surface ocean anywhere on Earth is free of plastic pollution. I know this sounds maybe a little bit far away for us residents of Wisconsin. You're thinking that we rarely ever get to see a seabird, and we're far away from the ocean. So why is this an issue? In the issue here is that the United States is a major exporter of plastic garbage. Each year we send tons and tons of trash to Africa and Asia, including to India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand. Turkey, the country of Turkey, is also a major importer of American trash, as is Mexico. And what happens to that trash is not always clear. A huge amount of it, maybe your toothbrush, maybe your cigarette lighter, Maybe my water bottle might end up in the oceans. So this question of seabirds really is relevant to all of us. And the ways that we can prevent it are pretty straightforward. We can just simply say no to plastic. When we order food from our favorite restaurant to be delivered by Grubhub or whatever, we can just say no. We don't need the plastic cutlery. You know, even though I'm sure that we've all gone to a party where we've been served coffee in a plastic cup, or drunk wine out of a plastic cup, or sliced a birthday cake with plastic utensils, we can in fact party plastic free. There's ways to do that. You can use just regular old utensils, and I really encourage everyone to never ever release plastic balloons. And also, if you're looking for alternatives to celebrating by releasing balloons, you can go to a website called Balloons Blow, balloonsblow.org. And the cool thing about that is that there are a number of alternatives to releasing balloons, and you can still have very meaningful and emotional and quite fun celebrations that you might think require balloon releases, but you don't need them. I love this picture because it shows the bottled water that is so ubiquitous these days. If we were all to stop buying water, we would all make a huge contribution to the welfare of birds in this country. And skipping plastic straws, it's the same as saying no to plastic cutlery. And you would be surprised, maybe you wouldn't, maybe I was the one who was surprised about the number of bulk foods that you can buy at your grocery stores these days. You can buy noodles, rice, beans, dried fruits, baked goods, pet food, even soap and toiletries in bulk quantities that don't come in pre-wrapped, pre-plasticized packaging. And I would really encourage everyone to become much better at recycling. And finally, you know, I know that everybody must have like a recycling bag, a reusable bag to use when shopping, but gosh, you know, it's the sort of thing that everybody leaves hanging on the hook on the door handle, but now doesn't have with them when they're actually shopping. So I'm saying, yeah, let's reuse those reusable bags and actually take them with us when we go shopping. And then finally, I really encourage everyone to advocate for bans of plastic bags, styrofoam, and straws. And if you think that this is, you know, a bridge too far, I would just remind everybody that Canada, just in the past couple of weeks, added plastic items to Schedule 1 of the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. And this has the effect of labeling plastic as toxic. And when something is labeled toxic in Canada, it paves the way for all sorts of bans that have already been proposed on some single-use plastic items. So it's not that such an impossible concept. It could be something that we should all consider. And finally, we're back to the magnolia warbler that I had on the first screen. The simplest and best, perhaps the funnest way to help birds is to simply watch them and to share what you see. The reason this is important is because effective bird conservation requires awareness, first of all, of the threat, and a huge amount of reliable information about each species. I say that it requires awareness of the threat because I'm thinking mostly about the passenger pigeon. This is the bird that was thought to be so ubiquitous by most people that they didn't think it was ever possible that that bird would go extinct. And awareness of its plight occurred after it was far too late. So awareness of the threat is very, very important. And the huge amount of reliable information is very important because there are so many birds and there's relatively few scientists. There's approximately 10,000 species of bird species in the world. There's 1,123 in the ABA area. And the latest checklist of the Wisconsin Society for Ornithology lists 441 species in our state. Each one of those birds, including this magnolia warbler, has its own food needs, habitat preferences, movement patterns, strengths and weaknesses. And the only way that all of that we could ever hope to gain an understanding of all of those needs is to mobilize a number of citizen activists who would be able to observe what they see and then report what they see. You would be expanding the ability to gather data about the birds that we all want to help. Simple action here is to use eBird to share your observations. eBird, in case you don't know, is an iPhone app that allows you to report the birds that you see anywhere, anytime. And it also records the data about when you saw it and also where you were when you saw it. So your sightings can be plotted then to a geographic spot, and habitat associations could be drawn from it. And a conclusion can be drawn that this bird spotted in this spot at this time was migrating or it was breeding, and it was there because of the habitat that was present for it. I encourage you all to think about joining community science projects also. There are a number of them that are quite excellent vehicles for mobilizing lots of eyeballs to get out there and look for birds, have a whole lot of fun doing it, and then to gather a tremendous amount of data that is very valuable to help us understand where birds are, how many there are, where they are not, when they are there. Global Big Day was the most recent that occurred just earlier this month, and that was a moment when birders all across the world came together to just report as many of the birds as they could find on one calendar day, and 52,900 people did that in 192 different countries, and they reported they found 7,257 different species. And if you think about the fact that there's 10,000 bird species in the world, on one day, at this Global Big Day, just a few days ago, nearly three quarters of the world's birds were recorded and found on that day. It's a huge moment. In case you're curious, 731 species were found in the United States. 250 were found in Wisconsin. There's another one of these big days in October. Then the Cornell Lab of Ornithology has a number of really quite excellent citizen science projects. One is called Project Feeder Watch, which runs from November through April, and it asks people who have feeders hanging in their backyards to watch them during the colder months, and then to just simply report what they see. The Great Backyard Bird Count does pretty much the same thing, but it exists for only like a 4-day period in February. And then, of course, there's the Christmas Bird Count, which runs every year between December 14th and January 5th. It's the granddaddy of all the citizen science counts. It's where groups of people try to find and count as many birds as possible within a circle. And there are circles all across the world. And the data conducted through the decades that the bird count has been going on has become a massive database of presence and absence and abundance and scarcity that indicates how bird populations are changing and growing and developing through time. So it's a I think that the bird watching in general has got kind of like a reputation of being something that only listers do. Where you would want to have a big list that's larger than, say, your friends, because I don't know, you're competing about that way. And I think that a better way to think about birding is to think that you have an opportunity to help us understand where birds are and why they're there, and if those numbers are growing or declining, and why. And this is probably the most valuable contribution that any one of us could do with our binoculars and with our time. And it's quite a simple and very valuable action. So that is that. I would encourage you, if you have questions that go beyond tonight, that you can reach me at the observatory at chuck@wglbbo.org. And you can also write to me at Bird City, Wisconsin, where you can reach me at director@birdcitywisconsin, all one word, .org. And I'd be happy to hear from you. If you're interested in a field guide to birds of Wisconsin, you can find one, I think, in the WSO, that's Wisconsin Society for Ornithology store. And with that, I think that if there's time, Jen, we could do some questions if there is some.
So I don't see any in the chat box, but folks, if you have any questions for Chuck about any of this, oh, we have our first question. Chuck, do birdhouses help?
They do help, but I want to draw a sharp line of distinction between what might be a bird house that is built for a species and designed for a species, and to that species requirements and needs, and those that might be just colorful woodshop projects that are more decorative than they are useful. There's a number of cavity nesting species out there that have very exacting requirements about where not only the entrance hole, but also the depth of the box. And these are all known. This is something that you can easily Google again and look for. I could even find it for you if you're interested in that kind of information. And also the boxes themselves need to be placed in habitat and in spots where the birds are most likely to use them. Boxes that are not placed in the right spots and boxes that are not designed to the birds' specifications will most likely either go unoccupied or they will be occupied by house sparrows. And as everybody knows, for all sorts of reasons, house sparrows don't need any help from any of us. So yes, they do, but in certain circumstances.
So this isn't a question, but Sue wanted to point out that another thing that people can consider advocating for is a ban on the use of lead in hunting and fishing. And the toll on raptors and waterbirds is huge. So that's something that's actually happened already on national wildlife refuges, but it's something that every hunter can do. And yes, I would support advocating for that transition as well.
Absolutely.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Chuck?
Just that I completely agree. I know that this is an issue that has been discussed for many, many years. There is resistance to among hunters because of the performance of the lead bullets, but the evidence is pretty clear that lead fishing tackle will sink to the bottom of a lake, and then it'll be found by diving waterfowl and ingested, and then the bird will succumb to lead poisoning. And you can see on X-rays of deer what happens to lead bullets when they make contact with the body. The lead portions of a bullet just break into a bazillion little pieces, and then the lead fragments are scattered throughout typically like the insides of like a deer or what have you. What will happen then is that the hunter will come and field dress whatever he or she has shot, leave behind a gut pile containing all of these little itty bitty lead fragments, and these the little bits of lead then in the gut pile they're eaten along with the innards by any bird that comes along to it, and of course that's the method by which they become poisoned by the lead. So yeah, I completely agree. That's a good point. That would be the ninth simple action that we could all do.
I used to work with hunters in Arizona, and they always joked around that if you were worried about performance of lead versus steel shot, that you weren't accurate enough. So I
Um,
think, and that's from them. I wouldn't say that to hunters, but that is what they would joke around about a lot.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, and out west, you might have the opportunity to see a California condor, which is a
mhm.
bird that has been brought back, reintroduced at considerable expense and great effort. Uh, and uh, and one of the ironies is that these birds are they'll eat these, they'll find, they're very good at finding these gut piles,
Yeah.
and the irony of all of this effort that we put into bringing back the California condor is that many of them have to be recaptured and then brought in for chelation therapy because they're all poisoned by the lead that they find in these gut piles. Um, yeah, it's a shame.
So we have another question. Will bluebirds use an area as small as a residential lot for habitat?
I don't think I know the answer to that question. I think that I would have to double check and compare what their minimum requirements are. Uh, Open space is important to the bluebird. Um, they want to be able to find an open expanse where they can, kind of like swoop down to the grass and find the insects that they hunt. How big the yard is, I'm not sure. I think that in many instances the answer will be yes. But if the yard is too small, I think the answer might be no. And I don't know where to draw that line. Do you know, Jen?
Yes, I know a little bit about this. So this is something that we actually got into with NHIP a little bit. There isn't a precise amount, but the big thing, just like Chuck was saying, is to kind of look at the whole, like a large area around your yard. So it's not just your yard, it's also your neighbor's yard. If collectively, um, it's mostly open, and especially with some longer grass with very few mature trees, you probably do have good habitat for both bluebirds and tree swallows. The only caveat to that is like Chuck said earlier, if there are house sparrows around, the holes that are big enough for bluebirds and tree swallows are also big enough for house sparrows. So if you have a lot of house sparrows around, especially which are common in a lot of residential areas, this might not be the best choice since they are so aggressive and can kick out and kill uh, both bluebirds and tree swallows. That being said, I'm watching. My parents live in a subdivision that has a bioswale off the back, and it's all long grass. But they have a tiny little lot, and they're getting tree swallows, and I wouldn't be surprised if they got bluebirds one year. So
Mm-hmm.
it really just depends on what that larger area around it looks like.
Yeah, and I tried putting them up in Estabrook Park too, in an area that was quite open and very large, much larger than any backyard. And I think the issue there was that the boxes became were too close to woods, and were threatened by wrens, and that
Mm.
was also a bad moment there. So
Yeah,
yeah.
so that is one of the thing, both for because house wrens are another. They're native, but they are more aggressive. One thing to watch out for because you want kind of that open area, or you want to. You can't really keep the wrens out, but you can keep the house sparrows out if you are interested in supporting smaller birds like chickadees. But wrens are a tough one. They're so small; they get in everywhere.
Absolutely.
Uh, any more questions? Okay. Seeing none, I would want to take one last chance to thank Chuck. This was a great presentation, and everyone will be getting the recording out in the next few days.
Good deal.
Okay. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.